Okay, so next on our list, you brought the book back. Who was chapter 5? I looked at it and now it's escaping me. Yes, you go. Okay, homework. So that's yours there. Okay, you can pass in today's homework, and I will pass back.
Is homework in the syllabus? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you be willing to go over one of the homework problems?
Yes. Actually, I'm going to bring up one if you don't. So let's see. So this was out of 10. Basically, as part of the homework, I want you guys to be thinking about it as a test. So the only place where some of you lost some points on is either not showing your work completely, not kind of showing the steps, which is fine. Again, you've got the answers there, but I want you to do more than the answers ultimately. And so you need to kind of show your way. Again, most of you did just fine. I made comments, I think, on all of your papers on that very last one, because I didn't see what I thought was the best answer, and it was different than what the answer key. So that brings me to another point I want to make. This is a brand new textbook. There's going to be errors in the answer key. It's almost just, I'd be shocked if we went the whole time. And I'm already finding a few little things that are either just minor tweaks. I didn't see any completely wrong answers. So be aware of that when you look at the answers, that, hey, this is a suggested answer. A, it might be just point blank wrong, but it's likely not. It's probably you. So you should work through it again, think through it again. But if you think through it again and you come to the same result, you might be right then. If you've given it that extra second go and maybe even bounced it off your classmates or whatever, you guys might find it. And then I want to report that back to the publisher, because that's how we get these corrections and made in either future editions, or then they will send out a little supplement of whoopsies to future people. So I knew we were going to be guinea pigs to some extent going into this, but I liked the book enough to say let's go for it, because I think the book does a great job of applying good common sense economics to these sometimes highly mathematical issues that we get in higher levels of economics. So let me start, since I brought it up, with that last one. So what the question was, which one would you pick? We had a constant elasticity demand curve, which is a bit of a simplification that we use sometimes in modeling a demand curve. So the demand curve, for probably the first time since you guys have been studying economics, was curved. Right? We had a curved demand curve. So that was different. And what we learned on this particular specification of the demand function, the elasticity was what? 1. At all points, A, B, and C, the elasticity of demand was 1. Which then meant that the question said, doesn't matter, or how did they phrase it? Because even after I reread the phrasing, did I bring my book? Oh, shoot. Anybody got their book by chance? Oh, Michael, you got it. What does the question read on that part?
Do you want straight from the beginning?
No, that very last part. I don't know if it's E or...
Okay, if this customer came into your restaurant and asked for frog's legs, which would you be better off charging, a high price or a low price?
Right. High price or low price. And I think the answer key said, doesn't matter. Didn't it say it doesn't matter? Or what did it say? I thought it said it doesn't matter because revenue stays the same. Yeah. You'd be indifferent in terms of revenue, but does the firm care about revenue? Ultimately. No. What do they care about? Profit. Now, you got to go to kind of extra layers there of what price would be better. What price would be better if we're thinking about profits?
High price.
The high price. Why?
They're not losing a lot of profit.
Yes, they're not using as much product and therefore incurring less costs, right? So as long as there's some variable cost, again, there's not enough information in this problem to really diagnose that.
What if you have a linear supply curve still?
Right. There could be circumstances, but that's not the likely case.
Oh.
The likely case is that a firm has variable costs with production, right? I mean, you produce one more unit, you've got a cost associated with it. And so if you have variable costs, then more production means higher cost. In this case, with the constant elasticity, total revenues are constant. It doesn't matter. So therefore, we'd want to pick the least costly production amount, which would be 1 in this case, or what is, I don't remember if it was 1,000 or whatever. But the less, the better, because you'll be having less cost and therefore more profits. Okay? Yeah.
I was just confused of what this comment meant, because like the question mark said to sell more at lower.
I don't remember what you said. High price to have more frog legs to sell. Yeah, I didn't quite understand what you meant. To more left over? Is that what you were kind of thinking? Okay, you were bringing in maybe an inventory argument.
Yeah.
But I wanted you to, you'd have more to sell, but then at what price? And I knew what you were kind of getting at, but I wanted you to see the connection between cost today and those could be lower if we produce less. And then the next time period, we'd want to do the same thing. So we're not allowing inventory. Inventory costs money. So businesses out there want inventory to turn over. We don't want to be hanging on to too many frog legs in our restaurant. And so that's costly to hold on to inventory. And so Walmart has done a fabulous job over time. The innovations that they came up with, that Sam Walton came up with Walmart, was to keep inventories very small. That's why they made so much money, and that's why they've been so successful early on. It was where a lot of their successes came from, was from that innovation. Yep, keep the product rotating and get just-in-time shipments to somebody buys something, it's off the shelf, a new one comes in, rather than having huge warehouses that are holding hundreds of units of inventory that they're paying rent on the building, heat, a security guard, labor. You know, you go down the list, there's cost associated with holding inventory. Okay, good. Kate, which one did you want to take a peek at?
Number 19 was
Number 19.
yeah. It was the one I asked you.
Oh, that was on today's?
Yeah.
Oh, on today's. I looked at that with Chelsea. Let's, is it fresh on your mind, so you want to hit it now? I guess that's fine.
Number 19 is
So-
the one with the $1 tax and $1 subsidy.
The picture in the book, I don't know if this is your question or not, was not quite right. Or it could have been done better. It wasn't completely wrong, although it was pretty wrong, I guess, with the shaded region didn't make much, why, did you guys have a battle going on what was?
No, we just tried to make sense of what we're
Well, here's what I think they did that I think they should clean up for the next edition. Good thing we got this videotape, then I can just send a copy of what I think they should clean up. I think what they did is they taxed the consumer $1, which is effectively like shifting this vertically down by the amount of the tax.
because
Nothing wrong with that. But then market forces will cause the price to go up because the net price is too high. And we're going to converge back to this equilibrium. And so this wedge they drew like this is not right. The wedge is the way we've been drawing it in class. The wedge that we have is right here. Right? So the QT, the quantity after the tax, here's Q1 where we started, The quantity after the tax is now less. There's the shaded region as we've been used to seeing. They shaded this region, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. It would be, I could tell one story of where that would make sense. If they were able to pay all the tax and quantity stayed the same, how much would the revenue from the tax be? But that's a stupid question.
Didn't we usually put the tax on the supply curve?
But if you're taxing the consumer, you're taxing the demand, correct?
Yes, and then the moral of the story is that it doesn't matter who we tax.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we're going to get the same result. That's the true moral of the story. So if we tax the consumer, what happens is if the producer keeps the old price, what was the old price in this problem?
This is the one that I
It
didn't.
doesn't-
Oh, it didn't give it to you,
Yeah,
did
it's the one
it?
that
You
gives
could
us-
have solved
it
for it,
just
but you
gives us
didn't
a
have to. It wasn't required to,
Well,
right?
no, this
It
one
just
only
gave
gives
us-
the dollar tax. It didn't give us any other number.
Oh, okay.
We had a subsidy.
You didn't even have a demand function or a supply function?
No.
Okay. So whatever this P1 is, if the producer kept it at that high and the consumer had to pay the tax, they're not going to buy as much. Look at this. At this price, consumers are only going to be willing to pay that amount. So there would be a surplus. The business would have a sale. The sale would bring us back down to here. And this then reflects the net price that, I'm going to try to use the book's notation. They've been using PS, right? Supply and demand, or no, buyers and sellers. The seller's price is this. The buyer, PB, which is my PC. What would you guys prefer? It's only Sam that's new to the class. You want me to stay consistent with the book? Or it doesn't matter? You like, you...
I want you to do it how you've been doing it.
Okay, good. That's good feedback because, of course, I'd prefer to do that too. And if it doesn't screw you up, so as you read the book or look at a problem, you can adjust better as long as mentally you've got the what we did in principle. Okay, good, good feedback. So PP and PC. There you go. Especially when you look back in your notes and then. So the price that the consumers pay versus the price that the producer gets, that's that wedge. Okay, and so the difference being the tax. All right, so yeah, that was a bit of a, I think, something that the book should clarify. I suspect they meant to do this. Now, you did calculate this tax revenue, didn't we, in that problem? Or no, oh, we just had the price after, right? Didn't it show the PC and PP?
That was 15.
Am I mixing two of
The
them?
question
Oh, okay.
literally reads,
That's from like.
this is
Oh.
19.
But 15, we thought they did their graph wrong too. Yeah. Yeah, 15 was the one.
So is this completely the wrong
Yeah.
problem for 15?
No, that's
Or
what.
does this
15
help?
was
Oh,
where they
okay.
did the tax.
15.
Where the graph is.
But
Okay.
19 was the one where they were debating between the
Coffee.
subsidy going directly or dividing it equally among.
Oh, right, right.
It is coffee drinkers or coffee vendors, and then all it says is the government will impose a $1 tax collected from buyers for each cup of coffee sold. The government will then subsidize coffee vendors $1 for each cup of coffee sold.
Yeah. So the subsidy and the tax end up canceling each other out essentially.
But
And
C was what you thought might be wrong.
what's that?
It's the answer to C in the book.
Right, right. So the and that was where it was taking the tax and distributing it evenly among. Yes, that would have a different implication. So the tax and the subsidy essentially cancel each other out. So we can use this graph here. If we now subsidize production, we can end up back to here. And the quantity with T and S, the tax and the subsidy, is right back to where we started. And those two things net each other out. We take from, we tax the consumers, we give it right back to the producers, which is kind of dumb, right? I mean, we don't have to interfere in this market. That's kind of a waste of bureaucracy and red tape and regulation, all of which isn't being shown here, which is important economic concept that the government has to have an employee collect the tax, right? Whoop, there's a labor bill, and pay it back. So there's this transfer going on. There's a lot of operating costs using society's resources to facilitate this thing that gives us the same result that the free market would at the end of the day anyway. Now, the other question was kind of interesting because it does have significant effects. So if we take the tax, at least this is my interpretation, and I guess I can't remember if the answer was a little differently. But if we take now this tax revenue, if we take that revenue and now distribute it back among the suppliers that supplied QT, we're not going to get back to where we were before. I don't think. I'm not quite seeing how that would go. I think there's a lot more details there. The one thing I thought about was if you've got if this is coffee, and Starbucks represents 80% of the market, right? And 20% mom and pop shops. And we take the tax revenue and we distribute it evenly among 10 suppliers. So we've got 10 suppliers. Mom and pops make out, and Starbucks gets kind of shafted a little bit on the incentive way. And I'm not, how you'd show that in aggregate, that would get more complicated than what we're probably ready to handle with the simple graph. But that, to me, was one takeaway from that was materially different. John?
The book actually said that you could assume all coffee places are equal, or all distributors were equal. So
Oh, okay.
that's what I was sure.
Okay. So market share issues were kind of assumed away. Okay. Fair enough. Okay. But those are great things to think a little deeper about and bring those up. That's some good
So
thinking.
were we having issues with the book, or were we just thinking of problems that were intertwined together?
Yes.
No, 15 really was drawn on.
Yeah.
Yeah, 15 was really drawn wrong. On this one,
I just gave up
what
on 15
the
because I didn't know what else.
in the outset of the problem, it doesn't say that all suppliers. You're saying in the text it said that.
No, it's
Oh, it did say that in the problem. Okay. Well, then it's probably fine. Yeah. The assumption was there and overlooked. Okay. So we can kind of have further discussion on that later if we need to too. Was there any other ones?
If we have other questions, can we just like come to your office
Sure.
and talk about it after?
Yeah. It might be more beneficial to ask like right after class
Okay.
with other people here, because chances are that might help, or somebody might want to, oh yeah, I see your point, or whatever. Okay. So let's try to hit them after class. All right. So chapter 4 drops us into the world of consumer behavior. Yeah, you can pass those homework. And I guess I don't really care if we do it at the end of class or now. But let's grab it now. So we're going to look at utility and indifference curves. Sam, since all these guys, I know where they're coming from. Do you remember hitting indifference curves in your class? Where we had something like this with maybe some beer and pizza and the optimal combination to maximize happiness. There's a budget constraint. The consumer's problem is to make themselves as happy as possible, maximize total utility, subject to a budget constraint. You probably had at least some of it in some form, but so that's what we're hitting: consumer behavior, consumer theory today. So we'll start off by thinking about some preferences. So preference assumptions. So number one is more is preferred to less. more is preferred to less? In general. Maybe more specifically is that your total utility, your total amount of happiness that you get from the consumption of a good, your total utility cannot fall with increased amounts of a good. However, it can stay the same. However, it can stay constant. Mentally, you can think of let's say that you don't really care about colors, you just care about being able to write on the board. And so Brenson's satisfaction goes up by 100 for one marker, 150 for two, just in case that one's not available or runs out of ink, 175 for three, 180 for four, and then like four markers, he can't even imagine using more markers than four. So assuming he doesn't have a storage issue that he can always say, thanks Russ, I only needed four. Well, here's another one. Thanks Russ, I only needed four. Thanks Russ, I only needed four. So as long as you can throw away the excess and not have it cause you any additional burden or cost, then I can't make him less happy by consuming more markers. So that's kind of our baseline assumption, is that you don't have to use them, or you're not incurring any cost of storage. You know, we can tell stories like that later as we get more complex. But in general, more is preferred to less. More stuff makes you happier, or worst case is it doesn't make you any less happy. You can just choose to ignore
So
them.
we're not having a hot dog eating contest right now.
Yes, yes, we can, yes. Forcing it down, or better yet, the chicken McNuggets that we have on video, yes. All right, so more is preferred to less. Number two, consumers can, or individuals, let's call them consumers here, consumers can rank their preferences. So you have the ability to rank. So we did this in principles class where we had a bundle of goods. So example, suppose you have 4 bundles of goods. A, B, C, D. Our underlying assumption here of the rational human being that's making a decision is that they can rank that. So one person might say, so Curtis might say B, C, D, A, right? And so he prefers B to C, C to D, D to A, that it goes in order that way. And then, furthermore, within an individual, we can assign numbers to those rankings. And they might tell us something also. So, we can use, one of the key things here is we can use numbers to preserve the ordinal rank of preferences. And this is essentially one of the keys to utility theory. So Curtis could put 100 on B, and if we put 50 on C, we can even make the assumption that Curtis likes C half as much as B. So we start to get an idea there of his preferences within the ranking. And maybe we just fall to 40 and 25, whatever. So while these numbers might have meaning to Curtis, they're not a cardinal ranking of utility. So anybody want to take a stab at ordinal concept versus cardinal? And give me an example. Cardinal measures and ordinal. Did you hear that in any of your other classes? Maybe some math classes, maybe?
Yeah, I feel like cardinal isn't cardinal more so like kind of the idea that the value is the value, whereas ordinal's just ordered.
Yes, ordinal's ordered, and something that has a cardinal, if I say this is 3 feet long, that has meaning of a distance. So distances are cardinal measures. And so if this one is longer than this one, we can use a cardinal measure of inches to have meaning. This one's bigger than this one because that number's there. And in fact, we can say if this is 36 inches and this is 30, there's a 6-inch difference, and that 6 inches has meaning.
Is it like league leaders and like, I don't know, stats?
Yes, all the statistics, that sort of stuff, is going to be cardinal measures of using numbers. But what we're doing here is we're just preserving the ordering. So we're kind of going back to this statement of more is preferred to less. All we can say is this one's preferred to this one's preferred to this one because it has a higher number. So the number is preserving the ordering of the preferences. Okay? So that's, I guess maybe I don't know if I want to call it a slippery slope or just the interesting thing about economists measuring happiness is that we use numbers, so people tend to have the idea that, oh, 100 for you, well, I've got 150, I'm happier than you are. And we can't do that. So we can't make interpersonal comparisons of utility. So, number 4, or number 3, I guess, here. We cannot make interpersonal comparisons of utility. So, for example, Brinson has 150 I guess I'll use this word. I don't know if our book uses it. I'm not going to use it. I've always hated that word. Units of utility are sometimes referred to as utils. And I just this doesn't sit well with me, but I thought I'd verbally tell you. Honestly, I can't remember if the book uses utils or not, but so Brinson has 150 units of utility from bundle B. If Brinson says he's got 150 from bundle B, and maybe he puts it in first place on his ranking too, we just can't say that Brinson likes B better than Curtis. So we can't say Brinson likes B better or more than Curtis. Can't do interpersonal comparisons. this is where social utility functions become a little troublesome. So we start adding together the happiness of individuals to try to solve problems for society, and then ultimately leading to decisions on who gets what. Well, that's because they're happier. Well, we can't assume that happiness can be compared across individuals. All right, questions or comments on that so far? So that allows us now to think about people's benefits and trade-offs with choices of goods. So here's the problem. This is kind of a little practice problem. Find the combinations of your favorite beverage and pizza.
Since not all of us are 21.
So those of you who are not into pizza, if you're lactose intolerant or something, then you need to switch maybe to a hamburger or something else. So if you're trying to avoid cheese, whatever. But I really want you to think about something you like. Usually everybody likes pizza, but if you don't like pizza, then fine. So I really want you to do this now. Think about your favorite beverage and pizza. Find the combinations of your favorite beverage and pizza that leave you with the same amount of happiness, or what we call utility. It's been kind of interesting. I've been doing a little bit of research on utility and happiness, and at the economics conference I went to, there's some research on subjective well-being. So how happy are you today on a scale of 1 to 10? I'm an 8, or I'm a 6, or how happy were you yesterday? And so economists are doing some research now on trying to measure kind of happiness in a sense. And so one of the comments from one of the people who was an economist that was working on this said, you know, I go to work, but I can't say that I'm really happy about it. But I do it, and it gives me meaning. And so there was a little bit of confusion and or question on, I do stuff that doesn't necessarily make me happy.
Well,
And to me, they were, I think there's confusion among academics and across disciplines, by the way, because they're doing this happiness literature a lot in medical fields. So they're finding that people who measure high in subjective well-being tend to be healthier, and then people around them tend to be healthier, and so happiness is kind of contagious, and it's kind of some fun work. Some questionable analysis of the statistics for the results that they're getting, and that's part of where the economist was jumping in and questioning some of that. But some interesting stuff, and so maybe you've heard me say this in class, because I talked to somebody after it. I said, well, I just think of it as well-being, not necessarily happiness. I say the word happiness a lot, but not insinuating that you're necessarily happy, but it gives you something. That's something that motivates you, whether if you're a hater, and I guess you're motivated by hate, or you're motivated by other things, that's utility. I mean, that's why we call it utility and not happiness, right? Utility is a little more generic, I think. So I just thought I'd bring that up because I will gladly slosh around the word happiness and well-being and utility, but I think the most generic thing of what makes you tick, what motivates you, creates your well-being, that's what we're talking about with utility. Okay? Question, somebody?
I was
Mike?
just going to say, like, when you kind of talk about going to work or anything like that,
could.
So maybe the first few days, like, you get utility from it, but now it's like that
Drudgery.
constant.
Yeah, but then the question would be, well, why don't you change? And it's like, well, I like to stay busy, I guess. And, you know, and that gives them utility to stay busy. And even though they're away from their family and they're happy when they're with their family, you know, there's something else going on. So I don't want to rule out that there's something else going on there. It's a little more generic, I think. All right, so, you know, let's think. Slices of pizza, probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's think of pizza over the next, let's see, what time period should we have here? Now these could be 6-packs or cases, depending on how we want to do it. We got to be careful with the units. But pick a combination that seems like a good combination. You know, like, hey, I'm pretty satisfied if I get, you know, 2 units of pizza and a drink. How much would you need to be compensated in drinks to give up one of those slices of pizza to keep yourself as happy as possible? So pick one combination as a starting point, and then really search your soul to think, gosh, if I had to give up my favorite slice, is it possible at all? First of all, maybe it's not. Like if 2, we'll go into those extreme cases like we did before. But in general, if you like both of these things, there's got to be some amount of your favorite beverage that I can compensate you for your loss of pizza, keeping your utility constant. Same thing here. If I take away that beverage, can I compensate you with any amount of pizza? And maybe we could have a half a glass. I don't know. So as you start to think through that exercise, because I really want you guys to believe in the shape of that curve and think about the trade-offs that you as a human being have internally as you think about things. We're not talking about prices. All this stuff is free right now.
It's a wonky curve then?
It won't, and we're going to get back to the shape of the curve. It won't be wonky under those other assumptions.
Okay.
So as long as more is preferred to less, but you can throw it away if you need to. So you could have, I'll allow a flat spot. It's kind of weird. It's not going to be a nice continuous function mathematically, but you can have a flat spot. It can be described and dealt with. But what does your indifference curve look like? So imagine having a collection of points where your total utility is maintaining constant at some level. There's multiple bundles. We can always trade one good for the other to keep your happiness constant. And that is your indifference curve. And the trade-offs that you have internally is called the marginal rate of substitution. We will pick up there on Friday.